Okay. Okay, if everyone can sit down, and then we can shut the doors. A little bit of housekeeping. Some of you will be aware that the printed programme for today had Dixon Chibanda on this morning and Arthur Evans on this afternoon. And Arthur very kindly stepped in as Dixon and his passport were separated. And we could not get them reunited. So Dixon, I'm afraid, although he was very, very keen to come, could not come. So it does mean there's been a change in the programme. So this will start now, and we will finish in half an hour. You will then have 10 minutes to get to where you're going for the work stream part 2, where you do some really hard work for us. Okay, now I'm delighted to introduce Matt Haig and Sue Baker. Matt Haig is a #1 best-selling author of Reasons to Stay Alive, which was about his depression when he was aged 24, and his subsequent efforts to overcome it. Also Notes on a Nervous Planet, and he's also a novelist, having written 6 highly acclaimed novels for adults, including How to Stop Time, The Humans, and The Radleys, and others. Now, he won the the Blue Peter Book Award and the Smarties Book Prize, and he's been shortlisted 3 times for the Carnegie Medal. Jolly good. Now, Sue, it's not as good as that. No, actually, Sue is Director of Mind, and she's led the Time to Change programme since its inception 10 years ago in 2007. She's worked for almost 25 years in mental health campaigning and communications, and she set up the Global Anti-Stigma Alliance in 2012 in order to help facilitate shared learning around the world to support other anti-stigma campaigns, and she's presented on many global platforms. I also found out she's met the royals loads of times. And she's also been very open about the fact that she has experienced anxiety and depression herself. And so we're incredibly grateful that Sue has stepped in to interview Matt. And I think you've got some questions as well, haven't you, for the audience? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go, but before I go, please, could you all put questions in your apps for question time? Because we haven't got that many, and I'll remind you again later. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
So, Matt.
So I think, well, a massive thank you for coming, Matt, and welcome to the Global Mental Health Summit.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, look at that, all around the world. We are going to, you're going to do a quick reading, not so quick, and then we're going to have a bit of a dialogue, have another reading, and then we're going to make sure that there's time for a few questions from the audience. So again, if you've got something that you've been burning to ask Matt, we'll hopefully have time for 2 or 3 questions. So without further ado, Matt, I think you're going to... Some of the people will have loved your work, and you're a hero to many of us. Others will be new to your work. So we'd really like you to share some of your experiences.
Yeah, well, I'm starting... You told me to start with an intense bit, didn't you? So I'll start, with an early bit of page 9 of Reasons to Stay Alive. This was my first sort of moment of crisis. I can remember the day the old me died. It started with a thought. Something was going wrong. That was the start, before I realised what it was. And then, a second or so later, there was a strange sensation inside my head. Some biological activity in the rear of my skull, not far above my neck. The cerebellum, a pulsing or intense flickering as though a butterfly was trapped inside, combined with a tingling sensation. I did not yet know of the strange physical effects depression and anxiety would create. I just thought I was about to die. And then my heart started to go. And then I started to go. I sank fast, falling into a new claustrophobic and suffocating reality. And it would be way over a year before I would feel anything like even half normal again. up until that point, I'd had no real understanding or awareness of depression, except that I knew my mum had suffered from it for a little while after I was born, and that my great-grandmother on my father's side had ended up committing suicide. So I suppose there had been a family history, but it hadn't been a history I'd thought about much. Anyway, I was 24 years old. I was living in Spain, in one of the more sedate and beautiful corners of the island of Ibiza. It was September. Within a fortnight, I would have to return to London and reality after 6 years of student life and summer jobs. I had put off being an adult for as long as I could, and it had loomed like a cloud now breaking and raining down on me. The weirdest thing about a mind is that you can have the most intense things going on in there, but no one else can see them. That wasn't in my mind, was it? That was actually.
That was real.
The world shrugs. Your pupils might dilate. You may sound incoherent. Your skin might shine with sweat, but there was no way anyone seeing me in that villa could have known what I was feeling. No way they could have appreciated the strange hell I was living through, or why death seemed a phenomenally good idea. I stayed in bed for 3 days, but I didn't sleep. My girlfriend Andrea came in with water at regular intervals, or fruit which I could barely eat. The window was open to let fresh air in, but the room was still and hot. I can remember being stunned that I was still alive. I know that sounds melodramatic, but depression and panic only give you melodramatic thoughts to play with. Anyway, there was no relief. I wanted to be dead. No, that's not quite right. I didn't want to be dead. I just didn't want to be alive. Death was something that scared me, and death only happens to people who have been living. There were infinitely more people who had never been alive. I wanted to be one of those people, that old classic wish, to never have been born, to have been one of the 300 million sperm that hadn't made it. There was nothing much in this room. A bed with a white patternless duvet, and there were white walls. There might have been a picture on the wall, but I don't think so. I certainly can't remember one. There was a book by the bed. I picked it up once and put it back down. I couldn't focus for as much as a second. There was no way I could express fully this experience in words, because it was beyond words. Literally, I couldn't speak about it properly. Words seemed trivial next to this pain. I didn't have terms like depression or panic disorder in my head. In my laughable naivety, I did not really think that what I was experiencing was something that other people had ever felt. Because it was so alien to me, I thought it had to be alien to the species. Andrea, I'm scared. It's okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. What's happening to me? I don't know, but it's going to be okay. I don't understand how this can be happening. On the third day, I left the room and I left the villa and I went outside to kill myself.
Whew. Right, thank you, Matt, for sharing that. It's amazing you've written so well about it. And so
I haven't
many
read that for a while.
I haven't.
That was like
it's quite.
flashback.
It is intense. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Okay, just checking.
Yeah, that's right.
So many people have been helped by your books. Many hundreds of thousands, and you probably don't know how many people's lives you've saved, how many people you've given hope to. So in my eyes, you are absolutely one of our heroes and a massive treasure to us. You're very open about the depth of your despair with depression and anxiety. When did you first feel anxiety? Was it as a child or a teenager?
Yeah, I think I was always nervous and anxious with a small a. I was kind of anxious about things. I can remember having panics about things, but I never considered myself having any particular mental health problem. I wasn't even aware really of mental health problems. I had things like stage fright and scared of, like, if I had to do a presentation at university, sort of like speaking in front of a room of people like this would have been impossible. But I didn't, it was just, you know, my nervous temperament. I didn't think it was a problem. I also think I had a sort of low-level, unrecognised depression, like a lot of young people, particularly young men who aren't necessarily very in tune with themselves or their emotions, don't necessarily know that. I would have described myself as a fun-loving person, perhaps, the week before I had my breakdown, but I clearly had things going on that I was masking and not facing.
So that was a very long time. And how old were you when you...
That was 24. I was 24, and that was, you know, like people say, you know, what's the difference between being an anxious person and having an anxiety disorder. For me, there was absolutely no question that I was suddenly ill with a capital I. You know when you're ill, you know when you're physically ill, you know when you've got flu and you can't get out of bed. Likewise, you know when your mind is flooded and your body is flooded. And I didn't know if it was a physical thing or a mental thing, and of course it was both, but because mental and physical are so interact so much. But I just didn't know what it was, but I knew I was ill.
Okay. There's something else you talked about in Reasons that I really liked when I first read it. And I think, unfortunately, some people, there can be a little bit of a knockback about how severe anxiety and panic attacks are. People don't realise how debilitating it is. And you were saying in Reasons to Stay Alive, you explained the gargantuan Herculean effort it took you to go out to buy a pint of milk. Can
Absolutely.
you share a bit more about...
I mean, we think of like a hero as someone who has to, do something spectacular, like jump out of a plane or climb a mountain or fight a war or whatever it is. But actually there's millions, if not a billion, sort of mental health heroes with a capital H. People who are sort of living in invisible sort of pain and fighting things that people can't see around them. Like literally, I've done some, quite sort of big things in my life. But the biggest thing I've ever done in my life was walking to the corner shop in the midst of panic disorder, literally going to the little brand of Londis around the corner in the small town in England where my parents lived and where I was back living. That, I had to fight more things to do that than anything since. It's made so much of my life seem easy compared to that kind of journey I made in the depths of panic disorder and agoraphobia and all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. People don't realise what a massive battle and what great strength it takes. People don't think about strength that we have. They think about the deficit of strength.
Yes, I know. It made me strong, because you can't not be strong with, it's literally, you're being forged through the sort of pain of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to say that your books are translated into 40 languages, aren't they? I hear.
Yeah, which is very nice. It's very nice when you go to different, recently was in Sri Lanka a year or so ago, and it's nice when you go to places where the conversation around mental health is a bit different to it is in the UK, but still, you realise the universal nature of mental health issues. And I think the subconscious reason, the selfish reason for me writing about it and talking about mental health is it has made me feel less alone, because back in 1999, 2000, there wasn't much of a mental health conversation. And it's amazing that we're having one now. And it's amazing that, people can, once you share an experience, whether it's in a book, a blog, however you do it, you normally hear something back, and normally it's supportive. And a lot of the things, I was 10 years in silence without talking to many people about this. And the moment you cross over that line and you have the confidence to talk about it, a lot of the things you were worried about in terms of people's reaction, aren't there.
We talk about self-stigma in our work in Time Change, and often the fear of other people's reactions is even worse than the reality. That once you start talking, in fact, you've just answered one of my questions, so that's good. That saved us a bit of time. But the question was, so after 10 years of not talking, what was it that triggered you to start speaking?
Well, I wrote a blog, actually. I wrote a blog called Reasons to Stay Alive, because I was doing some work for this charity where I was their writer in residence, and I'd run out of things to say, and I had to do a blog every week. And I thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to write this blog on a Friday morning, Reasons to Stay Alive, and click send on it and post it and see what happens. And it had far more of a response than anything else I'd written. I'd written lots of sort of boring writing tips and stuff, but no, and the response was sort of overwhelming. And then I wouldn't have turned that into a book, but then I had a friend, and it was the first time I've ever been asked to write a book. A friend told me, a friend who's got experience of depression themselves, you have to sort of turn that into a book. And then I played around with it. I had to sort of battle with my publishers who wanted me to do it as a novel. But I said, no, people who are actually in that place want to hear direct experience. That's what I wanted to hear. And so I had the idea of writing a book that wasn't at all academic. It's not the last word on depression. It's just me trying to find words to articulate to somebody who is on that metaphorical or literal cliff edge and try and sort of keep them in the world.
Absolutely. Wow, that's an amazing service you've done to our world. I just thought I'd ask a bit more of a controversial question, because we've been a bit too nice to you so far.
Oh, God, okay.
You say that you're not anti-medication, but you also say the more you research the science of depression, the more you realise it's still more characterised by what we don't know more than what we do. It's 90% mystery. A brain is not a toaster. It's complex. You say neuroscience is a baby science. So can you just explain a bit more about that and your views of medication? Because you talk about your weapons against depression. Knowledge, running, writing, reading, yoga, meditation.
I'm just saying we're not at the end of science, really. And, you know, in terms of mental health, the reason we still have this separate thing called mental health that's not physical health is because the brain is a bit harder to understand than a heart or a liver. And it's a bit more complex. The brain can think about the whole universe in more detail than it can think about itself. And the last thing the brain really is going to properly understand is the brain. And in terms of medication, we're definitely not there yet. I'm not anti-medication. I know of friends who depend on it for their life. I was given the wrong medication for me. I was given Valium, diazepam, which was the wrong thing for me and the type of thing I was feeling. But I'm not anti-medication. I'm not anti-science. I'm just saying we're still, you know, this in 100 years' time.
Still emerging. Yeah.
We'll look back and see this as a little bit of still rising out of the dark ages in terms of mental health. And I don't think many people would disagree with that. We have to trust the science, but we have to also understand that the science has a long way to go. So we also have to trust ourselves a little bit in terms of when we're going better and what works for us and what doesn't work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's so subjective. You know, one thing works with one person. You know, even more than a lot of physical health, mental health is so subjective.
It's amazing how different we all are and what works for one doesn't work for the other. So in the Time to Change campaign, we've had a very big theme in England, as have many other people combating stigma in this country and many other countries, about talking. We know that when those of us with lived experience, our own experiences talk, that's the absolute key to unlocking better attitudes in the general population. However, some parts of our society are talking more than others, and men in particular are not talking about mental health in most cultures in the way that women have begun to in some of our cultures. So we've talked before, and I'm really keen for the audience to hear you talk about, your story of the blokes down the pub. So please share that. And you talk about toxic masculinity. So can we hear a little bit more, and what you think is going to help get men engaged in
the blokes down the pub, that was just literally, I think it was the second week of touring Reasons to Stay Alive in Glasgow. It was quite sort of a working class, tough, stereotypically macho guy. Said that he had this best friend that he went to the pub every night with, discussed everything, football, relationships, the world, politics, everything with. But he'd never been able to share to his friends that he'd been experiencing depression. And, you know, they literally saw each other every day. And he said that it was my book that helped him to just realise it's not a big issue. Depression is a horrible thing, but it's not a big thing to share. And so he did. He built up the confidence, told his friend, and instantly he got straight back from his friend, me too. You know, I have been having this. Yeah. And so it's incredible when you just start that conversation, what you hear back. What was the second part?
So it's how we're going to get men to engage more in mental health.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of men flinch almost and have a knee-jerk reaction when they feel like words like toxic masculinity and stuff, because they feel like they're being attacked. But actually, the term toxic masculinity originated among men. It was a man who first used the term toxic masculinity. And it's actually, the toxicity isn't something that affects just other people, just women, and just, you know, the wider world. It affects yourself. And I know for me, you know, all it's saying, I think, is people need to be able to be themselves without feeling they have to fulfill a role. Women and men need to just have the freedom to be who they are, which I don't think is that controversial a thing. But I certainly felt myself that there was a problem with me as a man having a sort of mental health flaw, or having any kind of weakness as a man. Because you're encouraged at school to, to be the strongest, to be the winner, to do this, to do that, and in every aspect of life, we've got this sort of very, very sort of narrow idea of what a man is and also of what strength is. So you have this paradox where a lot of men, out of fear of looking scared, never admit that they're scared, but that is a fear that keeps them looking strong. But it's a weird sort of situation. Whereas I think hopefully there's obviously quite a few celebrities who now talk about it, members of the royal family who talk about it, sports people who are talking about it. We're changing it. There's no one type of man or type of human being who has something like depression or any kind of disorder. You've had prime ministers with depression, you've got astronauts with depression, you've got rock stars with depression, you've got influential scientists and teachers, and there's not a category of human who has a mental health problem. We all have mental health. As with physical health, our health can go wrong.
Thank you. Spot on. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask you to do another reading now. We've been talking quite a lot in our culture over here, and I know in other parts of the world, about the kind of terrible issues of self-esteem, not just affecting young women, affecting young men as well, but young women in particular. There's a sort of huge outburst of self-esteem problems caused by whether it's social media or academic pressure or, the world needs to look perfect to the outside world. And I really, really love this chapter, and I wish that this chapter was read in every schoolroom, in every country in the world. So I'm going to ask you to read it.
Yeah, it's just a response to those posters and magazine articles where you see, "Are you beach body ready?" Because it's not just about beach bodies.
Never.
It's about how we're encouraged to feel incomplete in order to be sold something. Whether we're encouraged to worry about aging, so you buy an anti-aging product, you're encouraged to worry about all kinds of things to buy insurance. Fear is the thing that often drives a consumerist culture. Yeah. But I thought we never hear from the beach when it comes to a beach body. So this is a note from the beach. "Hello, I am the beach. I am created by waves and currents. I am made of eroded rocks. I exist next to the sea. I have been around for millions of years. I was around at the dawn of life itself. And I have to tell you something. I don't care about your body. I am a beach. I literally don't give a swear word I'm not allowed to say, apparently.
Bleep. Yes, you're bleeping that.
I am entirely indifferent to your body mass index. I am not impressed that your abdominal muscles are visible to the naked eye. I am oblivious. You are one of 200,000 generations of human beings. I have seen them all. I will see all the generations that come after you too. It won't be as many, I'm sorry. I hear the whispers the sea tells me. The sea hates you. The poisoners, that's what it calls you. A bit melodramatic, I know, but that's the sea for you. Or drama. And I have to tell you something else. Even the other people on the beach don't care about your body. They don't. They are staring at the sea, or they are obsessed with their own appearance. And if they are thinking about you, why do you care? Why do you humans worry so much about a stranger's opinion? Why don't you do what I do? Let it wash all over you. Allow yourself just to be as you are. Just be. Just beach.
Thank you so much. So I also think that Matt's books should be on prescription in every GP surgery across our lands. So I think we've got not much. I'll chuck the rest of the questions so that we can take a few from the audience. I like the way you're kind of getting ready.
Getting ready.
Getting
I
ready.
like this bit. Well, it's only 5 minutes of silence, but no.
So who's got a question for Matt that you'd like to put to him? Any? It's great if you haven't, because then there's a gentleman in the middle. We take you first, and Sanchana in the back. So second in.
We've got three here.
Are we missing anybody over here?
One over there.
One lady over there. So we'll go 1, 2, 3 for now and see how quickly we get through.
Hi, my name is Chris Underhill. I'm a social entrepreneur and co-founder of Cities Rise. I'm an unadulterated fan of your novels.
Oh, that's allowed.
So whatever you say is fine. I've just finished the book about time that your novel about
How to Stop Time, yeah.
How to Stop Time, exactly. And I loved it. And I was furious with my book club when they didn't give it 10 out of 10.
Ignorant people.
But my question...
No accounting for taste.
But what I really benefited from the book was your wonderful sense of imagination. You just, as you opened the book and got into the first page, literally, you were suddenly in another world.
Oh, thank you.
A beautiful world, you know, a very interesting world, fascinating and difficult for the protagonist, which I won't obviously, spoil the story for. And I just wondered how you thought about your imagination, because we've heard a lot about how you have, considered your anxiety and so on, quite properly too. This is a mental health conference. But there is another side to you, which is, to me, as a fan, really important. Yes. So that's the question.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of my mental health issues were the sort of bad side of imagination, always imagining things, often imagining things that were wrong, or thinking of worst case scenarios, and very, very sort of vivid images coming to mind in that dark place. But there's a way, I think, and writing can help, especially writing fiction can help, of actually harnessing the nightmares and sort of containing them. You know, a lot of writers, I mean, Stephen King is the classic sort of writer about the sort of dark side of imagination, and he's sort of openly battled mental health stuff. And I think putting a lot of imagery and exploring your imagination through the sort of safe space of fiction is definitely something that helped me, and having a world that I could have some sort of control over, because we can't control the real world, but to have this sort of universe where you can play God and control over, it does kind of help you. It's kind of empowering. And also, the thing with stories, I read loads of stories when I was ill. I got properly into stories. I'd almost been trained through my English literature degree to be suspicious of story. It was all about style, and plot was a sort of dirty word. And I wanted to read sort of classic stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. Because when you're stuck in one little tiny moment that you can't get out of, you want to believe in change. And stories, for a story to be a story, is about change. So I love classic stories where lots of things happen.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great question, Chris. Thank you. Sanchana, would you like to ask a question?
Hi.
First of all, thank you so much for existing.
Oh, thank you.
It was so important for me as someone who is absolutely battling her mental health to read the narratives of people like you and Jenny Lawson, and it's really precious.
Oh, thank you.
What I wanted to ask you is, how would you encourage people who are struggling with their mental health to, rewire the narrative in their head using humor and imagination? Because that is such an important step to talk about your mental health once you start accepting it and infuse humor and imagination into it, because otherwise you're stuck in the narrative of struggle, which doesn't help. So how would you...
Great question.
Yeah, this is a great question. I was talking about this in the context of panic attacks the other day, because I had panic attacks almost on a daily basis for over a year, and I just couldn't get out of them because I was continually fighting the panic attack. So I was continually trying to stop having panic attacks, which makes total sense, because panic attacks are horrible. And they're not just panic attack, it's proper, one of the worst experiences you can have. I stupidly, it sounds flippant, but I almost played a sort of trick on myself in which I invited the panic in. I accepted the panic. I let it exist as panic, and I analysed the panic. And then rather than always doing what I did in terms of I'd want to go to a fast walk by the sea, religiously trying to find a YouTube video about breathing properly and this, that, and the other. And breathing is important, obviously, but we do need to breathe. But it was just about acceptance, not accepting that I want this pain, but rather than fighting it, just sort of allowing it rather than resisting it, because the fear sort of grows out of the sort of resistance. It's like a resistance training, and it gets stronger the more you sort of fight it. So I'd start sort of lying down on the floor and just sort of accepting it. And I think on a bigger level with mental health, we have to do our best to manage our mental health and stuff, but we also have to know our mental health. We can't pretend we're not experiencing something we are experiencing. And that was my problem as a young man, I think. I would just sort of rather get drunk or sort of go and party rather than understand what I was feeling. And it's about being aware of ourselves, because we've got so many distractions in this world, whether it's social media, Netflix, whatever it is, continual age of distraction. We can never, ever be bored again. But while that is great, this world of choice, we kind of lose sight of ourselves, and we're not used to that sort of quiet space of just being and listening to what we are and what we feel and what we need in life. And I think, weirdly, my experience of mental illness educated me about myself in some good ways as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for that great question. I'm afraid I've only got time for one more, and I don't want to ignore that side of the room. Could you make it a really short question, if that's okay, and a short answer?
Yes.
Do my best. I'm not normally good at that. So my name's Lisa. I'm a mental health consultant for an organisation called the Thrive Programme, but the reason I got into it was I had a breakdown myself. So I really identified with both of your readings. I think they're fabulous, and I want to give a copy of your beach analogy to every client I have. It's great. My question revolves around social media and self-image, which was what your beach body analogy was about. Most of my clients are coming in under the age of 18 now, a worrying amount between the ages of about 9 and 13, so really young, very focused on self-esteem and body image, and a lot of that is fueled by social media. And a lot of what we're seeing is that the children are so young that they can't understand that what they're seeing on social media isn't accurate. And I think my breakdown would have been a lot worse had it happened in the age of social media. So my question is, what do you think we should be doing about that?
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's about understanding it as a health issue, because I don't think we do understand, you know, when people are a bit sort of critical of aspects of social media, people say, oh, we used to say that about TV or cinema. I think that's the wrong comparison. I think the comparison is more like fast food company, a tobacco company, something that has health consequences and may one day need to be regulated, and there needs to be pressure to look at it as a health issue. How we do that, I have no idea. But I think it is, you know, as soon as we understand mental health as an important thing alongside physical health, as important as physical health, I think people will be a bit more mindful and aware of what's happening. And the optimistic side of this is that the youngest generation that we've got data for, Generation Z, the younger than millennials, they're the ones most in tune with the health consequences of social media and the need for digital detoxes and stuff. So I think if there is a solution to this, it will probably come from the people it's most affecting. It will come from the sort of younger generations.
Absolutely. And actually their attitudes are shifting more than anybody's in England. So we said this is the generation for change. And we've measured attitudes for over 20 years now, and young people are outstripping working age population attitudes. So there's great hope for the future. I'm going to steal just 30 seconds and ask you one more thing. Okay. Tim's going to boot us off in a second. But I really want to, with this global audience, Matt, I wonder what you could say to everybody in the room if you had, no pressure, but a silver bullet that would help us secure greater equity for mental health in all of our nations. What do you think one recommendation might be?
One recommendation. I basically think the big picture thing for me, the thing I bang on about most, is knocking down the wall between mental health and physical health. Because the more you think about what mental health is, it's not a separate thing. What is mental health? Even if you think mental health is just your brain is a physical thing. It might be a physical thing we're not understanding. Our thought process is physical. It's dependent on the whole body. So I would push for a scientifically viable, holistic solution to health, mental/physical. And we're all somewhere in that slash.
Brilliant, fantastic. Just a quick note, because I know people are tuning in. I think there's great applause. We'll give you one at that in a second. If anyone is struggling in this audience today, anybody tuned in, please, A, you're not alone. That's a big message from all of your work, from a lot of what many of us are saying. B, speak to a friend, family member, go to a GP, go online. Social media's got some good ways of engaging us, but the main thing is you're not alone. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Matt. That was fantastic. And they are some big and important messages. So your task now is to return to your workshops, and we want you to come out with 3 really top-notch recommendations from your work stream that I can take tomorrow morning into the ministerial breakfast, along with our declaration, to persuade them to back what we're doing globally. So 3 recommendations. Please do go off and see you later.
Where are you heading now? Do you want to?
You've got 90
Oh,
minutes.
desperate to meet you.